Diadiv agus Fulcha. Welcome to For the Rest of Us podcast, where we explore old tales to reveal the ever-present presence of ourselves. Julian is anam dum. Tasolam gamanhin shiv salt as an bod krill to show. Ebb tide to me as of the sea. Old age causes me reproach, though I make moan thereat. Happiness comes out of fat. I am the old woman of Beare that was. An ever-new smock I used to wear. Today, such is my mean state, I wear not even a cast-off smock. It is riches, ye love, it is not men. In the time when we lived, it was men we loved. An excerpt from the poem The Hag of Beare. She is a figure older than Celtic culture, and she's ridden the wave of humanity from Neolithic times to the Christian era into the present. We have ridden with her, pulling her stories along, shaping them to fit with the contours of our times. The Cailleach. The Hag. What do you think of when you hear that word? The Hag. A woman lacking power or ability due to the erosion of time. An outcast witch with a horrifying visage, wrinkled skin, and tangled hair. Sometimes she's described as a giantess. She certainly has the strength of one, whether through her magic or her own body's ability. Often she's described as being horrendously ugly or exceedingly ancient, but this does not diminish her power. Indeed, it may add to it. She is the land, and she is the wilderness, and she is the winter, and none can truly diminish her, though some certainly tried. The Hag of Beare, hailing from Scotland, is said to drive in winter with her farcha, or mallet. With this mallet she whips in the cold, biting wind, and whips out the last of the harvest. During winter she rules as a goddess of storms and of the churning sea. The duration of her rule varies, as winter varies, and can be divined by observing the weather on St. Breed's Day. It's said that if the weather is bad, winter will soon be over, but if the weather is good and sunny, that means that the hag is out collecting firewood in preparation for an extended cold season. What happens to the hag during the season is a forked road. Some accounts say the Cailleach is driven out by Breed in the spring, while some say that she herself becomes the youthful spring. In this narrative, she ages throughout the spring, summer, and fall, paralleling the path we can observe in nature and in ourselves. The foreword to the poem, The Hag of Beare, states that the hag, quote, had 7 periods of youth, one right after the other, unquote. In some stories, this youth can be indefinitely renewed, often by bathing in a specific lake, under specific conditions, such as detailed in the stories of Loch, where, unfortunately, this cycle of renewal was broken by the bark of a dog, perhaps itself a signifier of an encroachment on the civilized realm into her more wild one. She fits comfortably into this other, wilder world. In caves or on sea rocks she may make her home, from which spot she can observe or control the sea's weather. When asked about the source of her knowledge in divining weather patterns, she simply replied that she had consulted the animals. She eats, though she doesn't need to, often the products of this wild environment. She contains herself contentedly in this world, yet our world encroaches upon hers, where her ancient patterns are disrupted by the bark of a dog or the battle of a bull. The story of the Cailleach of Loughcrew and the Black Bull, detailed in Gearóid or Crualaoich's The Book of the Cailleach, describes the struggle in the story, a violent series of attacks upon the Cailleach and her family by a farmer, led on the advice of a talking bull, which no one finds odd, as a fight between the Cailleach's old, wild ways and the ways of the new, that is, agriculture. In this tale, the bull describes them as age-old enemies, saying that the Cailleach was responsible for releasing a plague which killed off every one of his kind, except himself and his mate. Ultimately, the forces of the bull and farmer are successful, but it's not without damage to the bull, who, himself, dies. Much like the brown bull in Anton Bolcugna, which we will talk about in an episode later. The farmer reaps the rewards of this attack through the silver and gold he was able to steal from the Cailleach's cave after she dies. The wealth of the Cailleach is the bounty of the land. Trying to steal her wealth doesn't always go so well, as in this story from Dún Chuin. She had the reputation of great wealth also, and people were anxious to steal it from her, since there were people that time who wouldn't be long doing just that. She understood that herself as much as anyone. And what did she do that day but go down to Chailleach in Crualaoich and steal a lobster out of a pot that was there? She brought it home alive in her apron, and she put it into the box where her money was. The following day, when she was away collecting food from the different places, a thief went up the hillside and stole in through the window of the Cailleach's house. He wasn't able to locate the money high or low until he noticed the box in under the old bed. He dragged it out. It wasn't too big, but there was a great weight in it. "It's full up, with gold, of course," said the thief to himself. He noticed that there was a sizable hole in the side of the box. "Isn't it a pity, you filthy old Cailleach," says he, "that you didn't think to mend that hole? But 'tis an ill wind that doesn't blow for someone's benefit." With that, he thrust his hand into the hole, and he started to grope around inside the box, looking for the gold. What did the lobster do but seize the hand in between his two claws and squeeze hard on it. No matter how the thief turned and twisted, he couldn't break the grip or pull at his hand. When the sun was setting that evening, the Cailleach arrived home. "You did well, lobster," said she, and she killed the thief with an axe. This story is interesting in many ways. Firstly, the assumption that her wealth would be gold, silver, or jewels at all, rather than the freely available natural products that she gathers. Secondly, that one should be entitled to take it. That is not right relationship with the land, and the consequence is destruction. She may test those who come to her in order to ascertain their worth. In these trials she will pit the strength of others against her own remarkable abilities. She can walk uncountable miles without tiring. She can leap rivers, carrying a person. She can outwork any farmhand that comes looking for his wealth at her establishment. She is no frail hag, but a robust, powerful entity. Often, the task she sets forth is nearly impossible, and most fail. To those who do succeed, there are rewards to be found. She has drunk wine with kings in an era long past. She has made kings, as well. Said by some to be the wife of Lugh, who himself is a representation of kingship, she may play the role of sovereignty goddess. There is much speculation and debate about the Cailleach na Gigs in Ireland and abroad. Monaghan Magan discussed this in an episode of his podcast, The Almanac of Ireland, and I'd urge listeners to go take a listen to it. To those who may not know, Cailleach na Gigs are stone depictions of a woman, often advanced in age, spreading her labia to reveal her vulva. These depictions could have been found on all manner of buildings, from castles to churches, but also in walls and on the border of towns and private homes. Romanian author Mircea Eliade, in 1993's The Encyclopedia of Religion, connects the Cailleach with an aged sovereignty goddess, a hag who transforms into a youth and blesses the victor once her test has been passed. That test would be one of lust. In such stories, such as the one involving Niall of the Nine Hostages, the hag would approach a group of men and either initiate or avoid sexual advances. The man who could satisfy her would be made king. Whether that satisfaction was a kiss or coupling is perhaps a matter of the moral sensibilities of the storytellers. In any case, Niall succeeded where his brothers failed, and was granted not only the kingship, but a successful reign, a theme of tale repeated in other stories. In Sligo, as the local goddess, perhaps with the name Gearóid, like the river, she was said to have lived on a nearby hill with Mad King Sweeney. However, in the Book of the Cailleach, Crualaoich sets forth that the hag is older than kings, and thus their need for justification of rule. The Cailleach is ancient, perhaps coming with Neolithic people migrating from Anatolia, beginning around 10,500 BCE, and arriving in Sligo more than 6,000 years ago. Many speculate she may have a connection with Inanna, but I wonder if that connection may have been the Phrygian Mater, otherwise known as Cibele or Cubaba. She was a mountain, Mount Ida, a goddess both maternal and hostile. In further connection with these Neolithic people, the hag is associated with many ancient complexes attributed to them. She is said to make her homes inside passage tombs, with such names as the Cailleach's house on the Cuilera Peninsula in Sligo, or the Hag's Bed in County Cork. The hag is unaccountably old. Every 7 years she would slaughter a bull and discard his bones in a pile nearby. Clergy tried to count the bones and determine her age, and time after time gave up because the bones were too numerous. A report from John O'Donovan from the excavation of Loughcrew includes this poem. I am a poor Cailleach Beare. Many a wonder I have seen. I have seen Carnball a lake, though now a mountain green. And perhaps she did see the ocean as a forest, as Pangea, the supercontinent of millions of years ago. In the Book of Leicháin, from the 1400s, she is called the goddess of the Dingle Peninsula, Crualaoich in Irish, meaning the seeds of Dana, a goddess. She created those seeds during her successive periods of youth, birthing or fostering several generations of people whose descendants live on the land. In these stories we see her periods of cyclical renewal, as well as her aspect of sovereignty as goddess. She is the land itself, creating and supporting. She is a creatrix outside of Crualaoich, as well as inside it. Stories detail her creations throughout Ireland as she moves about it. Folk belief in Scotland says it was she who created the lochs and mountains. This holds true across the Celtic Isles. In Sligo, as the aforementioned Gearóid, she was a local goddess of the earth who built megaliths by dropping stones. Caramore, on Chailleach, outside of Sligo, and Loughcrew, Loughcrew, two megalithic complexes, were said to be created from stones dropped from the Cailleach's apron as she moved across the land. The giantess apronful, a Bronze Age cairn in Wales, likely had a similar origin. Stones dropped in County Sligo were said to have been taken from Loughcrew. In Loughcrew's case, it said that she had come from the north, the Loughcrew cairn complex being northwest of Dublin in County Meath. Could the north be Scotland? Could it have been even further afield, an addition added after the influence of Viking raiders? Or perhaps there's some deeper mythological or astronomical meaning. Why was she moving? And where was she taking the stones? Did they accidentally fall from her apron, or did she let them slip? Is creation a happy consequence of other actions, sometimes violent, of hers? And what does that mean for us, who seek out purpose and intention in every act? This type of creation, as a byproduct of other actions of hers, continue throughout the stories. Some violent, some mournful, some simply because she needed a rest. Hag's Share in Carnball East, in Loughcrew, for example. It is an unusually large curbstone with a flat top, perfect for a giantess to sit upon. And, interestingly, If one were to sit upon it, one would be facing north. There are a great many things done in anger, and the Cailleach is prone to it just as any of us. There is one story of a cairn being formed by the scuffle of two hags, in which two Cailleachs were fighting by throwing stones at each other. Another story tells that she created a hill because she was mad at her husband. One story from Duchas Punk, i.e. Hag's Bed on Lavacali Hill, says the following. This hill is about 1 mile from the village of Glanworth, and on the road to Fermoy. The hag was an old witch. She was married to a man whose name was Jack. The two of them were very fond of the pipe. They could hand the pipe to one another from the Suachan mountain to Labacali Hill. One time, the husband refused to hand the pipe to the hag, and she was so vexed that she threw a big stone at him and killed him on Labacali Hill. The stone rested on the banks of the river of Winchon in 1838. It is still known as the Hag's Bed. Lavacali, Yabachali, means the Hag's Bed in Irish. There are more detailed versions of this story concerning this complex in County Cork. In another version, her husband was a powerful blind druid of Munster, Mo Ruch, meaning slave of the wheel, and she pinned him to the floor of the river Fwinchen with one massive boulder. He has his own lore. He could turn men to stone and cause storms. He rode a fiery ox-driven chariot bedecked with jewels that made him seem as bright as day. It is interesting that such a powerful man was reduced, over the years, to one whose death was precipitated by the refusal to share a pipe. Duchas Ponkai tells a different story of her anger, not over a pipe or with her husband, but with the pain of a mother. A report from Mrs. E. Walsh reads, Near the village of Glanworth, County Cork, is a celebrated rock called the Hag's Bed. The story is that a certain old hag of fortune-telling had a beautiful child whom she loved very dearly. According to tradition, she was in the habit of leaving the child in the hollow of a goodly-sized rock. It is supposed that this rock was made in the shape of a cradle. One day the hag left the child in peaceful slumber, as she thought, while she went to gather herbs along the river bank. When she came back, to her great surprise, the cradle was empty. The darling babe, as she used to call her, was seen in the shining waters below. The hag was so mad that she caught the cradle rock as if it were a pebble, and flung it about a mile from where she stood to where it can be seen today. It is said that no Glanworth boy or girl can pass the hag's bed after nightfall. I would imagine the babe's ultimate fate was the same as the husband's own, and her grief-driven rage shaped the spot of the land. Creation requires destruction. We, living upon the earth amidst its cyclical time, know this, even if we are less connected to those movements. So we see death, time and again, in many of Ireland's creation stories, particularly with the shapes of the land. Both the rivers Boyne and Shannon have in their creations the death of the women after which they are named. In both stories, the deaths are caused because the women approached wells of wisdom, from which they had been forbidden, and were pursued and killed by water, which gushed forth from the wells. The hag is killed in some instances during the process of creation. North of Gearóid is a deserted monastery called Monasteir Wiha, founded in the 5th or 6th century. Local stories say that the hag built the round tower there by tipping stones out of her apron, a method we're familiar with, but slipped and fell after she completed it. Her neck broke at the bottom of the tower. She's also credited with building the unfinished Meilic Round Tower in County Mayo. Here, she jumps down in great anger after being insulted by a passing boy and dies, leaving 2 imprints of her knees in the ground. She was said to have declared that she would have built the tower to reach the skies had she not been interrupted, drawing comparisons to the Tower of Babel. I find it interesting that in both of these instances, she's constructing Christian religious buildings, and she's killed in the process. She's helping establish a religion which, in these stories, replaces her. Much like in the case of the rivers Boyne and Shannon, her death at the Tower of Meilic seems to be in the process of acquiring further knowledge, which has been closed off to her. This quest for power lies behind one death story at Loughcrew. It was said that she would gain great power if she were to jump from hill to hill successfully, and so she began, her apron full of rocks, to jump. She made 3 jumps of great distance, dropping rocks as she went, but slipped and fell on the 4th jump in Patrickstown nearby, and broke her neck. She's buried nearby the spot where she died, some say in one of the heaps she had created in, quote, facing her beaten foes, to show that she was not afraid of them in life or death, unquote. A sentiment very similar to the burial of Queen Maeve, who was buried in full armor, standing, facing her enemies in Ulster. Anthony Murphy of Mythical Ireland proposes a theory that the jumping described in the story could be likened to the moon or sun rising and setting, as the cairns here are aligned astronomically, and the sun does appear to rise out of and set into them at different times during the year. Murphy points out that the people of the past measured time in a very different way than we do, using both the moon and the sun, and proposes that the Cailleach could be the moon, or at least associated with the moon. In Sliabh Cullen, the Cailleach is called Meluchra, the sister of Anya. Anya, whose name, according to Monaghan Magan, means brightness, is a sun goddess, and a sovereignty goddess herself. These sisters, the sun and the moon, work separately and in tandem in their planetary aspects. Recall the story of the Labakali Wedge tomb, where the Cailleach was said to have killed her husband with a large boulder, pinning him to the riverbed of the river Fuintian. He, also, was associated with great brightness, due to both the jewels on the chariot and the fiery oxen that drove it. She, as the killing force, was his opposition. Monaghan MacLeod, the son of the ocean, was said to have been her husband in some stories, her father in others. Along the coast of Munster she waits for his return. She's waited so long that she has died, and her remains fossilized to stone. Or, the stone could be the chair upon which she has sat while waiting. Remember that she was said to have control over waves and the storms of the sea, so her association in these instances with Monaghan MacLeod is not so unusual. It's also worth noting that the Paps of Anu are in Munster. The Paps are 2 breast-like mounds, and are named as such. Dá Hí Anan, the breasts of Anu. Anu, like many others, is an ancient mother goddess. Boy, the wife of Lugh. Evelyn, of Daidanan origin, on Sliabh Cullen in Armagh. Gearóid, the rough river of Sligo. Beare, queen of winter. Cailleach of Beare, perhaps stemming from a word which means sharp or shrill, and could be associated with winter, wilderness, and the horns of beasts. Many names are ascribed to her, and she isn't often called by any name at all, let alone her actual name. Sometimes, knowledge of her true name can kill her, a parallel to other Indo-European lore, such as with trolls in Scandinavia. There are other Norse influences upon her. In the Hag of Beare poem, she says that her right eye was taken from her, echoing perhaps Odin's loss of his eye. Scottish tradition says the rocks she used to build the coasts and mountains there came from Norway. Much like the involvement of Christian priests in her stories, she evolves and adapts to changes in society, her station sometimes changing with it, the plight of many goddesses and gods. John O'Donovan, during the excavation of Loughcrew, said that, quote, she is now a banshee in some parts of Ireland, and is represented in some elegies as appearing before the deaths of some persons, unquote. The fact of it is that there are many Cailleach throughout Ireland, and many stories about her, or them, and they are all as true as the others. The goddesses are not single, static entities, in the vein that we expect the Christian god to be, and there is no centralized dogma about her, same as any Irish goddess, or probably any pagan goddess. We cannot view her, or them, with the lens of modern Christianity. She is expansive. She is the earth itself, and she creates the earth, as well as the storms that blow in from the ocean and rip across it. She is, at times, grasped by her emotions and acts out accordingly. She has daughters and sons, long lines of them, flesh from her flesh, as well as fosterlings. She may test us, or she may simply continue on her way, thinking very little of us at all. Her thinking is in eons, and she has seen seas withdraw and mountains surge. Her life we cannot account, because she doesn't live in our world of numbers, and she doesn't care to. Her world is beyond the city, beyond the farm. It's in the rocks which she carries in her apron. I used many resources while researching and creating this episode. The most instrumental, I would say, was The Book of the Cailleach, Stories of the Wise Woman Healer by Gearóid o Crualaoich, and I would recommend that for further reading if one has interest. I found a wealth of stories on duguspunk.ie, as usual. Carokiel.com and wildernessireland.com were helpful. Kuno and Meyer's 1899 Irish Stories and Songs too was also consulted. Anthony Murphy's YouTube channel, Mythical Ireland, was a great resource for the Cailleach, as well as for any information on megalithic structures, particularly around Drogheda, but not exclusively. I'd like to credit Monaghan Magan in a talk that I saw online with 3 things. First, Anya being the sun goddess. Second, the phrasing of the farcha whipping in the winter and whipping out the harvest. And third, the notion that the Cailleach was young with the ocean before her being the forest, and that forest being Pangea. I'd like to thank the creators at Freesound for the clips I've used in this episode. Nigel Nix for Irish Whistle, Imeanta for Sea Waves Against Rocks, and ELP43 for their version of J. Scott Skinner's song Miss Shepherd, which you'll be hearing soon. And you, for listening. Go to Mila Mahagwiv, a Chailleach.